Hello, my name's Rachel. I'm the Senior Parliamentary Advisor at the RSPCA. I'm going to be your tutor for the next 20 minutes. Today, we're going to talk about working for the RSPCA as a lobbyist, which is what I do. And it's just one of a huge range of jobs that you can do at the RSPCA that perhaps you weren't aware of and maybe you hadn't thought of before. Now, for those that don't know, the RSPCA is an animal welfare charity. We're actually the oldest and biggest animal welfare charity in the world. And as well as the frontline animal welfare work that maybe you've heard of, that our inspectors do, and that our animal centres and our rehoming centres do, we've also worked to make sure that animal welfare laws are the best that they can possibly be. Now, we've been doing this for almost 200 years. In fact, improving the law was one of the things that our founders actually set us up to do. Now, you don't need anything for this class other than perhaps a notebook and a pen. So that said, I'm going to share my screen and then we can get started. There we go. Okay. So today I'm going to talk to you about my job at the RSPCA, what it is I do and how I got it. Now, by doing that, we're going to cover three main things. So first of all, what actually is a lobbyist? Because I'm aware that that is a term that maybe you haven't come across, or perhaps you have come across it, but it's just been called something different, and I'll explain that in a second. We're then going to talk about what it is I actually do all day. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about how you become a lobbyist, how I got my job, and what the key skills are that you need. So let's dive in. First of all, what actually is a lobbyist? Well, for one thing, we have a lot of different names and a lot of different terms that maybe you have heard before if you haven't heard the word lobbyist. So some people prefer to call themselves public affairs professional or say they work in public affairs, or maybe government relations is another one, or political stakeholder management is another one as well. But all of these are the same thing, just with different names. And all of them mean someone working to change the law and to influence government decisions. Now, I just want to explain what that actually means very quickly, because I'm aware that the phrase influencing government decisions might sound a bit iffy to some of you, maybe. It might sound like something that sounds like someone trying to play the system or something like that, but it's really not what it is. Lobbying is all about improving the law and improving government decisions and using the expertise that the organisations that we lobbyists work for have built up to make the law better, to make it work better, to make it fairer, all kinds of things. So it's not in any way a bad, in inverted commas, profession. We are genuinely working to change the law, to improve the law, to make it work better and to make government work better as well. Now, a lot of people also think that lobbyists only work for businesses, but that's not true either. Most charities will have lobbyists working for them now, for example. And in fact, there are loads of different places that you can work as a lobbyist. You can work for a business, for example. You can work for certain parts of government. You can work for certain types of individual, or you can work for a charity. And in my opinion, the charity sector is the best place to be a lobbyist because it's a place where you can really make the most change for the best. And then what a charity lobbyist does in particular is try and get changes in the law and in government decisions that will make things better for the cause that your charity works on. So to translate that into what I do is I work for better laws to protect animals and to protect animal welfare. And if you care about animals like I do, it's a really great job because you really can affect so many animals' lives through the laws that we're working to change and improve. So how did I get here? Well, the first thing that you need to know about me, and this is true of all lobbyists, although some will lie and say it's not, but we're all just big politics nerds at the end of the day. And speaking for myself, I've been a big politics nerd for longer than I'm ever going to admit on this lesson. But to be honest, you need to be a lobbyist because at the end of the day, you're going to spend your entire working week thinking about politics, working with politicians, working on new laws getting passed through Parliament. And if you don't have some kind of level of interest in that, you're going to find it quite boring quite quickly. That said, it's probably not going to surprise you to learn that when I went to university, I did a politics degree. And then I also did a politics-related master's as well. After university, my first 2 jobs were working for a political party. The first was running an election campaign for someone who wanted to be an MP. And after a couple of years of doing that, I went to work for the party's headquarters in their membership team. So recruiting new members and trying to make sure that the members they already had remained members, essentially. Now that both the kind of the academic experience of politics, but also the practical experience of politics gave me, I hope, a lot of insight into how politics works, not just in theory, but in practice as well. And really crucially into how politicians and political parties work, which isn't something that's always necessarily obvious from just reading about it or from, an outside view of any kind, really. I then made my way into lobbying and into the RSPCA, I think about 7.5 years ago. I started off with a role in the campaigns team, so on kind of the public-facing communications for the charity, and then eventually worked my way into the political team after a couple of years. And I think I've been doing my current job for about 5 years. Now, my career path is very, very typical of people who do lobbying-related jobs, particularly in the charity sector. That kind of 3-step approach. You go to university, you work either for a politician or a political party. And to be honest, for a lot of people, it is often working for an individual MP. And then you go into lobbying after that. And it's fair to say that the majority of lobbying and lobbying related jobs will require a degree of some description. But the industry is opening up a little bit if you think that this is a job that you'll be interested in, but you're not sure that university is something that's going to be for you. So there are increasingly apprenticeships on offer, particularly in the charity sector. It's something that we're particularly good at. The RSPCA political team has just had our first apprentice who's now got a full-time job with the RSPCA, which is fantastic. And there are also specific roles, not just for recent graduates, but also for people with other types of experience that are looking to get into the industry for the first time. So things like there are increasing work experience placements, for example, and other type of work placements. And there are increasingly paid internships as well, and that sort of thing that perhaps don't require a degree. So if this is something that you're interested in, but as I say, you don't think university is going to be for you, there are ways, and there are increasingly ways into the industry that don't require a degree. Now, for me, lobbying is a good fit because I really am interested in making change, and I'm particularly passionate about the cause I work for, animal welfare. And I have to say, if you want to really do any job for a charity, but particularly a lobbying job, those 2 things have to be the case. You have to be interested in change and you have to be passionate about the cause. And then in terms of my skill set, I'm a good communicator, or at least I hope I am. Perhaps you're in a better place to judge that than I am at the moment. And I do have that understanding of an interest in politics, both from a kind of an academic perspective, but from a practical perspective as well. Now, if this sounds like you, if you're interested in making change and you're passionate about the cause and you also have the communications and the political skills, then this could definitely be a really good fit for you as a potential future career. Okay, so that said, what is it I actually do all day? Well, one of the favourite things about my job actually is that there is no such thing as an average day or even an average week. It's a really, really varied job. I'm particularly working for an organisation like the RSPCA that works on loads of different topics, means that, in an average week, I can be working on 5, 6 more different issues, and really, really different issues as well. Things like, trying to bring about a ban on keeping primates as pets, right through to more transparent labelling on meat food products, right through to things like introducing compulsory microchipping of cats. There really are a lot of different issues that I work on in the course of a week. And I love that. Personally, I really love that variety. It keeps me interested and it certainly keeps me on my toes, shall we say. But that said, there are some key tasks that are in my diary and on my to-do list every week. Now, meetings and events, either attending them or organising them, is probably the biggest one of those. Meetings in many different forms and with lots of different people really are key to this job. Now, those could be in-person meetings, they could be virtual meetings of some description, or they could be sort of conference calls or phone meetings. They could be with RSPCA colleagues, they could be with people from other charities, they could be with politicians like MPs or members of the House of Lords or councillors. They could be with other organisations like the police and the fire service, who are involved in animal welfare in some respects as well. Or they could be with officials from any of those organisations, or of course they could be with a huge mix of different groups of people. Similarly, they can be really small, they can be just one-on-one, or they can be huge. They can be up to 30 or 40 people for the biggest meetings where we try and get the whole sector together, for example. Ultimately, lobbying is a job about relationships, and it's a job about people. So these kind of interactions, at meetings are really key. Events are key too. Now, we do them less often than meetings, but events like receptions or panel debates, that sort of thing, are another way that we can get people together and speak to people. Now, as part of my job, I organise all the political events for the RSPCA. And to be honest, it's the part of my job that I enjoy the most, because I really do enjoy seeing people who care about animal welfare as much as I do, kind of getting together to celebrate that fact and to actually work out what we can do to affect change together. Aside from that, you're also going to spend a lot of time thinking and writing about policy and about policy change in particular. A really key skill that you need in this job is to be able to write or communicate in some other way in a really concise way on issues that are often quite complex, particularly where new laws are concerned. The way that laws are drafted in the British Parliament is quite old-fashioned, quite complicated. And you need to be able to kind of distill the really key points into something that's very easy for other people to understand. And of course, you have to keep on top of what's going on in Parliament too. And to be honest, when a law on your policy area is going through Parliament, this often feels like it's a full-time job. It can be really, really full on when a bill is in full flow, as it were. And kind of the final really key task, I suppose, is you need to keep on top of your subject too, outside of Parliament as well as inside it. Now, at the most basic level, that just, to be honest, means keeping up with the news and knowing what's going on in the world. But it also means knowing who the key people are in your policy area, whether that's journalists or scientists or other type of experts, and knowing kind of where you can find their work. What publications do they write for? What sort of media are they going to appear on? That kind of thing. And making sure you set aside a time to actually keep on top of what these people are saying and to understand it. Okay, so we've touched on some of this already, but I just wanted to set out really clearly the key skills I think you need to be a lobbyist and to be a good lobbyist, most of all. Number one really is communication and building relationships. It's an absolute non-negotiable that you have to be able to do this to be successful. You have to be able to write and speak really well, and you have to be able to do that to lots of different audiences. You have to be able to build really productive working relationships as well. And again, with a really wide range of people. And the good news is, of course, there are loads of different ways that you can practice and get better at this, both in your education and just in your day-to-day life, because after all, we're all communicating all the time. So it's very, very easy, as I say, to practice this. Understanding politics probably requires a little bit more effort than just thinking about how you speak to your friends. But a lot of the basic understanding you need, you can accomplish just by being engaged with the news and with causes that you care about. You don't have to study politics academically to be a lobbyist, I should say. If you do, fantastic. It will give you a deeper grounding, particularly in some of the things around parliamentary procedure, for example. But it's absolutely not essential. And there are other ways to build up the knowledge that you would get from doing a degree or an A-level, for example, whilst you're working. Organisation and time management is really important as well, because frankly, there is rarely enough time in the day when you're a lobbyist. And so you have to get really good, both at managing your own time and your own diary, but also staying on top of the timelines of projects that you're working on that perhaps you don't have that much control over. So for example, when there is a new law passing through Parliament, you're not going to be able to dictate when that happens or how quickly it happens, and you have to be able to adapt. And what that really means in practice is having a really good hold on the rest of your diary, so that if you do suddenly need to prioritise a piece of law that you're working on that suddenly comes back to Parliament when you weren't expecting it, you have the flexibility in your diary to be able to do that without causing absolute chaos to the rest of your work, essentially. I touched on event management as something that I really enjoy, and obviously that has kind of its own list of organising and time management requirements. You know, things around booking venues and guest lists and catering orders and all of that sort of thing. But honestly, if you're generally an organized person, there will be no problems for you in mastering that. And to be honest, you'll probably really enjoy it like I do. And finally, research and mastering a topic is also really important because you have to know your issue really well, both the detail of it and also kind of the bigger picture stuff of how it fits into sort of political debate at the moment, and particularly the political debates that might be going on inside the government. And when you work on a lot of issues, as you will do if you work for an organisation like the RSPCA, that can be tricky, and you do need to make sure that you give yourself time to do it. You need good research skills, obviously, but you do also need to be able to retain information really well. Now, whether that's just you have a really good memory, or like me, you're very good at taking notes, it doesn't really matter as long as you can retain that information. And you also really need to be able to get your head around new information really quickly. And when I say really quickly, that can go from, you know, knowing that you need to prepare for a debate, finding out about it at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then having to brief an MP sort of 3 or 4 hours later. So you do need that kind of nimble mind that, again, you can practice and you can get from your education. Okay, I hope that some of what I've said today has made you think about whether you could do this sort of job, become a lobbyist or something similar, and especially one in the charity sector and one for an organisation like the RSPCA, because I really think it is a fantastically fulfilling and enjoyable job. I just wanted to leave you with 3 final top tips if it is something that appeals to you that I think you should consider. Number 1 is you have to be able to put your own politics aside. Now, what I mean by that is you have to be able to work with all politicians from all parties, including ones that you don't necessarily agree with, sometimes on some really big issues. You can't be party political in this job, which may seem like a really silly thing to say, given that I've told you that most of us have worked for political parties or politicians in the past. As soon as you put your lobbyist hat on, so for me, as soon as I put my RSPCA hat on, as it were, I have to be able to put aside my own politics and my own party affiliation, and just get on with the job of working with politicians from across the spectrum. And you'll notice I haven't told you what political party I worked for, and that's very much on purpose because it's not relevant to what I do anymore. If you are really passionate about a particular party, then perhaps you should be thinking about what kind of job you could use your skills to get within that party. There are plenty of different jobs from within a political party that might suit you. And similarly, if you really couldn't work with someone who disagrees with you on a particular issue, then think about a job that you could do to further your views on that issue, rather than trying to kind of cram yourself into a job where it may not be possible to do that. Now, I've said this again and again, but number 2, good communication is an absolute superpower. It really is so important. And to be honest, not just for a lobbying job, but for any kind of job that involves people and involves communications. But it really is very easy to improve on because, as I say, we are communicating all the time. Every time you speak to your friends, every essay you write, every time you answer a question in a class, every time you tweet, every time you post on your Instagram stories, every time you post a TikTok, all of that is communication. So think about it, think about how you use it, and particularly think about how you can improve communicating things that maybe are complicated in a simple and concise way to other people. Finally, though, tip number 3, that said, you don't have to be an extrovert, you don't have to be loud, you don't have to be outgoing, and you don't have to be super chatty to be a good lobbyist or a good communicator in generally. Speaking as someone who isn't, speaking as someone who's definitely an introvert and definitely quite shy in myself, I can tell you it's not about being the loudest person at a meeting or having the most to say necessarily. Successful communicating and successful lobbying is about having the right thing to say and saying it at the right time in the right way. And that's not necessarily something always that the loudest people in the room can necessarily do. If you are an extrovert and outgoing and really loud and chatty, fantastic, you will probably be a good lobbyist. But equally, if you are shy and introverted, you can be a really good lobbyist too. Okay, and that's pretty much all I had to say to you today. I hope you found some of that useful, and I hope you found some of that inspiring maybe. And just to close, I really would encourage you to think about jobs like this when it comes to thinking about your future career, and definitely think about the RSPCA and other charity causes as a place to work, because they are really fantastic organisations doing really valuable work, and you'll get a huge amount of job satisfaction out of it, I promise. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much.